But I want to start with the why. The five-piece series investigates, of course, James Jordan's death. And what was the why for you guys as far as why we needed to tell this story?
I grew up in North Carolina. Shelley's from North Carolina. The entire filmmaking team, Clay Johnson, who co-directed the first two episodes with me, and we co-wrote the series together, we're all from North Carolina. So this is a case that we've known about for the majority of our lives. I was 13 years old when this crime took place. So it's one of those seminal moments that sticks with you, especially when you're young. And it was covered in the news media to a much greater degree in North Carolina than it was on a national level. And there was more detail that we were privy to because of that coverage. And it really always stuck with us. And we realized that there were a lot of questions about this case from a very early stage. So when the opportunity to tell this as a documentary series and do a really deep dive into all of the facts and try to present all sides of the story to attain the truth presented itself. It's something that we all really felt personally connected to, in addition to wanting to, discover the truth of what took place. It was very important to us in telling the story to tell the history of Robeson County, and specifically in the decade leading up to when this crime occurred. It's a very fractured history. There's a lot of issues that have come that are now known, specifically through years after this case took place called Operation Tarnished Badge, where it was a large corruption scandal in the sheriff's office of Robeson County, where many deputies were convicted of criminal activity. And knowing that there was corruption in law enforcement, that investigated this case, it raises questions. And there was also a great degree of systemic racism in the county. And, we wanted to look at these and frame, that narrative and that history. It's applicable. You have to have an understanding, and audiences have to have an understanding of that to understand the environment where this case, was investigated and where this crime took place. It's one of the many elements that we don't believe have been told about this story in the past in great detail, and wanted to present that for viewers. The Perp Walk, it was a bit of a media spectacle. And the sheriff at the time, and it's been stated in our series by the district attorney of Robeson County that has never happened before, and it's never happened since. I think it speaks to the high profile nature of this case. I think it speaks to playing to the media in this case from a very early stage. And I think it speaks to trying to present a public narrative that they wanted to as being uniform. I think we now know when you look at the actual trial, and one of the things that's very important about our series is this is the first time that audiences will see this evidence in great factual detail. This is the first time that audiences will hear the interrogation audio tapes of how the deputies invested this case. This is the first time that audiences will hear the trial audio. It's never been digitized before this series. So it's, there's a lot of facts that come out. And that Perp Walk, where two teenagers, Larry Demery and Daniel Green, are kind of marched in front of the cameras, it speaks volumes visually about the approach to investigating this case. But at the national level, a lot of the focus of the media was on conspiracy theories. We're kind of on some of the more salacious aspects of this case. We realized very early on that those were not true. A lot of the suggestions that were made, specifically as it related to the Jordan family and to Michael Jordan, they were not accurate. Those were false narratives. And I think those false narratives were born out of the fact that the actual facts and the evidence didn't make sense. And as human beings, when things don't seem to make sense, you kind of say, oh, well, there must be something else that they're not telling us. And it led people down these kind of conspiracy theory rabbit holes. And that was not our intention to ever look at it from that perspective. There's been enough of that around this case already. Our goal was to look at all the evidence, look at all the facts, and pull it back layer by layer to determine the truth. And when you determine the truth, you realize that that conspiracy theory kind of nature that had surrounded this case for so long in mystery was not true.
And you bring up the Jordan family. If he himself, if Michael Jordan or any member of his family watches this series, what do you think his reaction would be, or their reaction would be?
Well, I would hope that anyone from the Jordan family, if they were to watch this series, would understand that we've approached this with a great degree of humanity and sensitivity that has not been applied to this story. Losing James was the greatest loss of their lives. It altered the course of their lives. And we have a great respect for that loss. And we also have a great respect for them that they did not want to grieve in public. This was a private matter for them. There was not anything else that they could contribute to that narrative, because the facts that were presented to them were very definitive, and they were presented to them in a very definitive way. I think what we take issue with is the evidence that was presented to them and to the rest of the world. And I think that in time, with a lot of the new information that has come out, it deserves a re-examination. But I would hope that they would view that we did not want to tell this series from that kind of salacious conspiracy theory, nature. We wanted to look at really discovering the truth, but also doing that with a great degree of humanity that has never been applied to the individuals involved in this case, and a great degree of respect for the loss that they suffered.
It's about all of the families impacted. And while the Jordan family absolutely suffered this great tragedy, and there's been a lot of focus on that, there are a lot of families impacted by what happened. And I would say, if you think you already know this story, to really consider you don't know the whole story, and to go into it with that mindset of let yourself be moved to move through the story as we kind of unfold it and connect those dots. Our goal, as Matthew said, is to, we're in a search for the truth and whether correct justice occurred. And that's the real question here.
And clearly you can't say definitively, but with your journalism investigative background, Daniel Green has always maintained his innocence. What are your thoughts on that, or has it changed after you've done this series?
Well, I would say after making this series, with the great degree of information that we explored and investigated in creating this series, we have a lot more knowledge about this case than probably most people. And we've tried to lay all of that information out for viewers so that they can have a greater understanding of what took place in this case. As documentary filmmakers, it's not our role to pass judgment. We're not a jury. We're not judges. It's our role to be a vehicle to present all of this information to the world. And what I will say, though, is I believe there is a substantial question of fact when it comes to this case, when it comes to the evidence as it was originally presented at trial. And Daniel Green is deserving of a new hearing in front of the courts for that evidence to be viewed.